Okay guys, welcome to part 3 of Codecademy course. Let's start this thing, all right? We left off at 17% on Python, and the part that we were working on, let me change my mouse control to reverse so I can scroll correctly on my laptop. Okay, so we left off at 66% at mix and match. We're going to pick up right from there and get going. So we're going to be getting to pretty cool stuff like Pig Latin. For now, let's click conditionals and control flow and keep rolling with it. Okay, so we're on the part, so we did mix and match, and now we're on conditional statement syntax, okay? Now, conditional statements are the meat and bones of programming, okay? They are the main things that we use to basically provide logic for our programs, make it intelligent. This is the case where you give your program the power to actually reason through something and then make a decision based on that, okay? So this is, if you've ever heard of if then, that's kind of what's going on here, okay? It's an if then scenario. And the example here is showing, it's saying if the answer is left, the double equal sign means comparison. So it's comparing the variable answer and seeing if it equals left. If that's the case, it goes, hey, this is a verbal abuse room, you heap of parrot droppings. So it's a little lame joke that they put in there, a little irony. But other than that, you know that this statement is gonna evaluate to true. Remember, we were working on booleans, and this statement is gonna evaluate to true because answer on line 3, we made it left. We used the assignment operator, or the equal sign, and we said, hey, take answer, make it equal to the string left. And then we came down to line 4 and we're checking, is answer equal to left? Now remember, this whole part is going to turn to true. And anytime an if condition is true, then the block underneath it executes. So in this case, after the colon, we have this block here, print, and that gets executed and that runs. But anytime this situation is false, the block underneath that if statement does not run, okay? So for example, let's say if we were checking if answer equals to right, in this case, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that block is going to run on line 5, or do you think that block is not going to run? Okay, if you answered that it's not going to run, perfect, because this will evaluate to false, right? Because answer is left. Cool, let's go back. Let's see what they want us to do in the instructions. Here they're just telling us a little bit of if 8 is less than 9, 8 is less than 9, so this statement will print. And in the instructions it says if you think the print statement will print to the console, set response equal to y, otherwise set response equal to n. So now if you think line 5, that statement is going to run and we're going to print out the verbal abuse room, go ahead and put y in the response. If you think no, go ahead and put no. But if you listen to pretty much what I've discussed so far, you know that the answer here is going to be y, because we know for sure that line 5 is going to run because line 4 is going to validate to true anyways. Beautiful. So we got it correct, and on the right hand side you can see that it printed out this is a verbal abuse room, you heap of parrot wrappings. Ignore the none. That if you were writing a real program, that actually wouldn't even show up. So it's just Codecademy thing. Start next lesson. Which is why I would recommend download Python and get something called idle and run things in there. So for example, if I open up on my Mac idle, this thing opens up right here and I can type in code here. So I can say if or I can say right equal left, and it's going to say false. But if I said right equal right, it's going to say true. So it runs it immediately, and you can check what's going on. Okay, great. Now let's see what they're talking about. Let's get some practice with if statements. So we're going to do some more practice with if statements. In the editor, you'll see two functions. Don't worry about anything unfamiliar. We'll explain soon enough. Replace the line on line 2 with an expression. Okay, so we have to replace this line on line 2 with an expression that returns a true statement. So you could say pretty much anything you want as long as it evaluates to true. Okay, so we can say banana, right, is equal to apple. And to be extra fancy, here's what we can do. Boom. Okay, so let me ask you, is banana equal to apple? No, so that's false, right? So this whole thing inside turns to false. But then the not outside is the opposite, right? It's the negation or the negatory operator, and it turns that false into a true statement. So that whole statement then turns to true. So this is just a fancy way of having a true statement. And the reason why we're having a true statement right there is so then line 3 can run. Okay, because if this whole thing evaluates to false, we never get to line 3. This needs to evaluate to true, which is why hopefully it's making sense why we learned about the booleans, because otherwise if statements, we won't be able to run them ever if we didn't know about the false and true stuff that's going on. Okay, now it says on line 6, replace with an expression that returns true. Let's keep it simple. 5 equal 2 plus 3. Okay, 5 is equal to 5. It's going to return success number 2. If we do this successfully, it should run line 9, and it should say success number 1, and it should run line 10, and it should say success number 2. Now, to break it down a little bit further, there's a little bit of stuff that's going on here. We have a function. Okay, let's just look at from line 1 to line 3. We have a function. What's the name of this function? The name of this function is using control once. Okay, DEF means define. So we're defining a function called using control once. The reason why we define functions is we want to name block. It gives us a way to name blocks of code. And then whenever we want to refer to that giant block of code, we can just use the name of the function. So look at line 9. We're effectively just using that function, and then it runs the whole set of instructions. Okay. Imagine why we use a variable to store some information in there. Like if you had some inconvenient number, right? Like boom, boom, boom. Instead of trying to remember it every time, it would make sense to kind of store it as a variable, then refer to that variable, right? But what if you want to write a block of code that you want to keep using again and again? How are you going to save that in a variable? Well, you can't. If you did something like this, print, print hello, that's one line, and then you said return success or something, that's not going to work because variables can't store blocks of code. And so that is why we use a function, so we can use those blocks of code for whatever we want. Okay. Now, we created a function called using control once. In that function, we use the if statement, and if that statement runs fine and returns true, then we go to line 3 and we end up printing out or returning success number 1. Now let's look at our function that starts from line 5 and ends at line 7. What's the name of this function? It's called using control again. and it does the same thing. It has a if condition. It checks if it's true. If it's true, it returns success number 2. Okay. Now here we're just defining the functions. When you're defining the function, it's kind of like if I said v is equal to blah 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 blah. That's not going to print out v. That's not going to show you what v is. You have to then call v. So you can say v, or you can say print v, right? And that's going to show you what v is onto the screen, onto that, this black screen over here. Okay, but same way you call the function. Okay, so we created this function, and now we want to call that function so it actually shows it out to the screen. So on line 9, you can see we're calling the function using control once, and on line 10, we're calling the function using control again. And the beauty of functions is that we call it with just one single line, and it uses those blocks of code. So what do you think is going to happen if I run it? Do you think it's going to say success number 1 and success number 2? If you said yes, you're right. Good job. Okay, that was simple enough. Let's keep moving on. Else problems. I feel bad for you, son. This is a reference to Jay-Z's song, 99 Problems. But you know what ain't one. So I like their sense of humor at Codecademy. Okay, so the else statement complements the if statement. So basically, you have if or else, okay? It's not as complicated as they make it sound. It's just like real life. If you want to go outside and get ice cream, cool. Else we can stay home and be bored. I don't know, okay? So it's literally just like that in programming. You have if statements that you can complement with an else statement, and that will most of the times complete your logic. If this person worked this many hours of the job, then pay him this much. Otherwise, don't pay him anything, okay? Or otherwise, pay him less. Depends on your situation. Okay, so it says complete the else statement to the right. Note the indentation for each line. So our indentation. Okay. All right. So my screen is kind of small, so things run through a little bit, but we'll try to work through it, and we'll check out if our indentation is on point. Answer: tis but a scratch. Nothing wrong with that. It's grammatically it's syntactically correct. We're defining a function here called black knight. So now black knight is going to be used to refer to a block of code. If answer is tis but a scratch, return true. Well, answer is tis but a scratch. We made it that. So this is going to return true. Otherwise, it just returns nothing. But this note here says make sure it returns false. So obviously, we have to put false here. Okay, what happens here? Line 4. If answer is equal to tis but a scratch, it returns true. But if it's not tis but a scratch, it returns false. So it goes to this else part. Okay, if this part evaluates to false, we skip over line 5 and we go to line 6, and then we execute line 7. If this part returns true, we go to line 5 and we never go to line 6 and we never go to line 7. Okay, because if you go outside to get ice cream, then you're not going to be sitting at home being bored at the same time, right? So think about it kind of intuitively. Okay, French soldier. If answer is not go away or I shall taunt you a second time, because answer is tis but a scratch. I see it right there. So I already know it's not going to be returning true. It's going to go to this else part, and in the else part we have to put false, as the note says next to it. So this is going to return false. The next one is going to return, and this one is going to return true. And I think at this point we can just run it and see what happens. Cool. It just says start next lesson. Beautiful. Okay, I got 99 problems, but a switch ain't one. Again, Jay-Z's reference. elif is short for else if. So, you can also say else if. Okay. If we do this, else if we do this, or else if we can do that. Okay. Now that gets a little bit different than why don't we just use multiple ifs, but let's not think about that. Let's keep it simple and just think about we have three connections here. We have if, else if, and else. Okay, so we have a situation where if something is true, then we return 1. If that thing isn't true, we go to the else if part and then we check the condition in the else if. If that condition evaluates to true, then we return -1. However, if the condition of the else if returns false, we skip and we go to else. Else doesn't take a condition. Okay, so if I had to give you a format for this, it would be for if conditions. It would be like if, and then the condition goes here. If that condition evaluates to true, we go to this block. Okay, else if, same thing. It takes in some kind of condition. Conditions are things that evaluate to true or false. Okay, then we run this block, and then if we have the else, we don't have no condition. Okay, no condition, because else just means if none of the conditions match, then this happens, this block. Okay, just to give you a little bit of an intuitive sense of this. Okay, so I'm commenting out. Hopefully you remember comments. This part is just ignored. Okay, so it says on line 2, fill in the if statement to check if answer is greater than 5. Okay, simple. If answer is greater than 5. So answer is greater than 5. On line 4, fill in the else so that function outputs -1 if answer is less than 5. So answer is less than 5. Okay, so that's simple. So if answer is ever greater than, variable answer is ever greater than 5, we return 1. Else if answer is less than 5, we return the variable -1. Okay. When's the condition this won't work? When the answer is 5 exactly, right? If the answer is 5 exactly, we should return 0. So else return 0. I don't like their if-else conditions. They're not very logical. They don't make sense. They're so arbitrary that it makes it hard for you to understand what's actually going on, right? If, else, if, the perfect example they could use is, imagine the game rock, paper, scissors, right? If user picks rock and user 2 picks scissors, then user 1 wins because user 1 picked rock. That's a much better example that they should use. Like return 1 if answer is greater than 5. That's okay. Not a problem. We'll keep going. Okay, so let's save and submit. Cool. Yeah, so this function, so now something new is happening is that we have this function here. We're defining a function called greater less equal 5, and it's dependent on an input called answer. You can call this input x, but you have to make sure that everywhere you say answer here, you call that x. Or we can call this input whatever we want, okay? But we have to make sure that on line 2 and line 4 we stay consistent, right? And we call it the same thing. And how we use this function, so we just define this function there. It doesn't do anything there, but then we call it at the bottom. So you see we're calling this function and we're passing in 4. So we go to this function and instead of answer, we actually are passing in a 4. And then it goes 4, if 4 is greater than 5. Is 4 greater than 5? No. Is 4 less than 5? Yes. so it returns -1. That's why you see -1 right there at the top. It never goes to the else part. Now, line 17 puts 5 into the function, so answer becomes 5. Is 5 greater than 5? That's actually not true, so we don't return 1. Is 5 less than 5? That's not true, so we don't return -1. Now we jump to the else condition, else statement. Else doesn't have a condition, so we don't check for anything, and we immediately go to line 7, which says return 0, which is why you get 0 right below the -1. And lastly, we have 6. Is 6 greater than 5? Yes, it is. It returns 1. That's how you see the 1 there. It never executes this part of the code here, and we are done. Okay, let's click next. And I think so we're at the conclusion, and we're just gonna be reviewing this stuff, pretty basic. So here's what you've learned in this unit. You've learned about comparators. So comparison operators are like this one here: less than, greater than or equal to, equal, not equal. Okay, so 12 not equal 13, that will return true. 10 equal 10, that will return true. 5 greater than or equal to 5, that will return true. And 3 is less than 4, that will also return true. Boolean operators, everything that evaluates to true and false, but more than that, Boolean operators are known as, you got the or, you have the and then the not. Okay, so true or false, right? True or false, anytime you have an or statement, again, imagine that silly example I gave you earlier of ice cream and poison. You would respond yes because you like at least one of those things, which is probably ice cream. So you'll respond yes. So the only way an or statement will be false is if both statements are false, right? Like, do you like snakes or poison? I don't like either of them. They scare me. So both are false. As long as any one of them true, the overall statement is going to turn out to be true. So here, true or false is going to return true. Okay, over here, again, you have a compound expression with the and. So you would evaluate this part, you'd evaluate this part, and then you'd read that with an and see what happens. So for example, 3 is less than 4, that's true. This is true. You have true, and this whole thing will end up turning into true. Okay. This is just talking about some random functions, this and that, and we have no idea what they are, so we can't possibly evaluate this to a true or false in our heads. We would have to know what these functions actually are. But just know that not negates something, so just the opposite of something. Conditional statements, pretty straightforward, right? If something is true, we print out or we execute the next line of code. Else if, so if the first part is not true, else if, if another part is true, then we print or execute that block of code. But if none of these things are true up here, we go to the else part of the code and we just execute that, whatever that is. Okay. So here they want us to write an if statement in the flying circle. So the flying circus. So they want us to go into this function and write an if statement, and it must include an if, else if, and else statements, at least one of and or not, a comparator, and must return true when evaluated. So cool, let's see how fast we can get through this. Okay, so I can say if 5 is greater than 6 and 7 is less than 5. At the top of my head, I didn't think what's that going to evaluate to. So what is this? 7 is less than 5, that's false. 5 is greater than 6, that's false. False and false is false. Let's go here. And we're going to say print or print bananas. Okay, it doesn't matter what we say to print. In the else if condition, we are going to put 5 equal 5. We don't actually need to put anything else, and then there want an else statement. So we have satisfied this, where we have if, elif, and else. We have satisfied the second bullet point, which is we have included an and. We have satisfied the operator. You can see we have equal, we have less than. Okay, let's make it fancier, I guess. Let's do this, and let's do this, right? Okay, and then finally, the flying circus must return true when evaluated. So when you actually evaluate it, it should return true. Okay, so I guess what they're trying to say is that no matter what happens, it should return true. Okay, so we need to make sure all of these end in a true. So it's 5. Let's make it 5 is less than or equal to 6. Now this part is true. Let's make this part an or, because now automatically I know this whole statement is going to be true even if this part is false, because it's an or. Okay, so I can say 5 is not equal to 5, which is false. This part is true. True or false is again true. So where line 4 is going to run and is going to return true. Line 8 is guaranteed to run if line 3 doesn't run. And then we can say return true. And this should be good. Boom. Okay, guys, we have completed the conditionals and control flow. That was a lot for this one video. I'm gonna stop right here for part 3. Stay tuned for part 4. It'll be coming shortly, and I'll see you guys there. Take care. Bye.